Hello everyone. Welcome to the Clarity 16.10 Supportability and Feature Training. This is Denise Saladay, and today I'll be covering the topic of Blueprint enhancements. Let's summarize what's new this release. And you may recognize the first group of capabilities as things that we've done last release, only we've extended the capabilities to include the abstract investment custom subobjects. Specifically, you will now be able to create business roles for required attributes, conditionally required business roles, and you'll also be able to configure a create dialog experience for those abstract investment custom subobjects. The second group of features are all new this release. And the first one is the ability to hide and show attributes for the Properties module in business roles for master objects. And the last thing that we will cover is the capability to configure the details flyout for subobjects. Why is this important? We've had a lot of great feedback from customers. They love the capabilities that we delivered last release for the required attribute support, both conditional and always true, and the new create experience for subobjects. And we really wanted to close the gap and support the same capabilities for custom investment abstract subobjects. Customers have also requested the capability to hide and show attributes in the property screen conditionally based on business roles. And lastly, we wanted to allow our customers to have more control over their user experience in the details flyout for subobjects. So we've provided a capability to control which modules you want to enable or disable in the details flyout for subobjects. Last release, customers could create always true required attribute business roles, but what's different this release is now, as a target object, they'll be able to select an abstract investment custom subobject. And in this case, I'm using an example of a custom subobject called capacity percent. And as you can see, I'm building an always true condition where the capacity type must always be required. As a reminder, for these types of business roles, they're not enforced in the Quick Create Plus experience, only in the Create dialog. And you would create these types of business roles in the parent master object blueprint. And you can build conditions and actions only on those attributes that are in the target object. Similar to the business role that I covered previously, administrators could create conditionally required attributes in business roles. And the new capability this release is, once again, in the target object, they'll be able to select abstract investment custom subobjects as the target. And you can see from the example that I have here, I have built a condition when the attribute committed equals yes, that the approved by attribute will always be required. And as a reminder from last release, these types of roles that are conditionally required are enforced during the update experience, not during create. And only those attributes that are within the target object can be used to build any conditions and actions within the business rules. Abstract investment custom subobjects will now have toggles available. They'll have one to enable or disable the quick create, which is the plus in the grid, or they can enable or disable the creation dialog experience. Now, so there's no upgrade impact, the quick create is enabled by default and the creation dialog is disabled by default. Once the Create dialog is enabled, users will then have a new button where they can create instances. Only level 2 sub-objects are supported. Administrators will now have the capability to configure the Create dialog for abstract investment custom sub-objects. They'll do so the same way they do other sub-objects. They'll go into the blueprint and they'll click on Edit Module Details for the sub-object that they want to configure the dialog for. And they'll just go into the Create tab and they'll drag and drop attributes from the left pane that are available into the layout screen on the right. Administrators can configure this layout to be whatever they want, and it can include both required attributes and non-required attributes. However, if there is a required attribute and the administrator does not configure it into the layout creation dialog, what will happen during runtime is whenever the user tries to create an instance, those attributes will automatically be appended to the dialog and they'll be required before the row can be saved. That's assuming that those attributes that are required don't have a default value or auto numbering set up in Studio. If they did, then those values would just be populated and they wouldn't be appended to the dialog. Administrators will be able to tell which attributes are required because they'll have an asterisk next to them in the left panel and in the right panel. We do not support TSV attribute and rich text attributes in the creation dialog. This is an example of a creation dialog for a sub-object called capacity %. All required attributes are designated with an asterisk, and that will be true for both Studio required and Blueprint required attributes. And users will see this dialog whenever they click on the blue New button. And if they're not going to have the Create button enabled unless all required attributes are populated. If there's a required attribute that administrator did not configure to the dialog, and it doesn't have a default or auto numbering defined in Studio, it will automatically be appended during runtime for the user while they're creating it in this dialog to enforce the required attribute business rule. And the last point that I want to make is this dialog layout may appear different for the same sub-object. It really depends on which master object that they're doing the creation against, and the layouts could be defined differently. Next, we're going to take a look at the update user experience. Both always true and conditional required attributes are enforced in the required fields dialog. Users will get this dialog while they're updating sub-object data in the grid or the details flyout screens if there's required fields that have not been populated yet. And they'll continue to get this dialog until all of the fields that are required are populated. So if they go in and they update any attribute in the record that may not even be required, as soon as that value is saved, it will save the value, but they'll keep getting this dialog until those business rules have been satisfied. And they can cancel out of the dialog or escape or navigate away from it. You know, especially they might not know some of the values that they need to fill out and what they should be. And they can go back and do it later, but they will continue to get the dialog until all the rules are satisfied. As we saw on the last slide, the same behavior will also happen here while updating sub-object instances in hierarchies. Users may see the required fields dialog if they have any required attributes that need to be filled out. Let's say, for example, that we have a record, a sub-object instance, where all the required fields have been populated. If a user goes in, any user, and tries to null out or clear out any of those required attributes, regardless of whether they are always true required or conditionally required via business rules, the user will not be allowed to null or clear out those values. And if they try to, they're going to get an error message saying that they're not allowed to empty out a required attribute. And this will be enforced for sub-object data in both the details flyout and in the grid. In the required fields dialog, I wanted to cover some points and reiterate others. And this is, again, as while you're making updates to the abstract investment custom sub-objects. Both always true and conditional required attribute business rules are enforced during this operation, and the fields that appear in the required fields dialog will appear in alphabetical order for any attributes that are required and are missing values. You will see the dialog when updating sub-object instances in both the details flyout, the grid, and the hierarchy cross-investment grid while updating sub-object data. And any time that you're performing bulk update operations or multi-paste or fill handle copy, we always ignore always true and required attribute business rules during those types of operations. If you have a dependency on conditionally required attributes where one attribute needs to be filled out, it's conditional based on another attribute, and so on, each time that those business rules are triggered and you update a value, the second subsequent level will display another required fields dialog until all the conditionally required business rules are satisfied. And lastly, this capability is supported only for level 2 sub-objects. We introduced a new capability this release where you can hide and show attributes based on conditional criteria and business rules for master objects in the property screen. You would implement this capability by creating a business rule inside of a blueprint, and first you would define a condition for when you would want to hide your attributes, and then the next you would pick a new action called hide attributes, and then you would select the attributes that you want to hide. And you have one of two options here. You could either say hide selected, which means you would hide the attributes that you selected, or you could do the opposite of that and you could hide everything except for the attributes that you've selected in this role. Now when you're building conditions or selecting attributes, you'll only be able to select those attributes which are in the target object, similar to other blueprint rules. Administrators can create these types of business rules for projects, ideas, custom investments, and page objects. And the last thing I want to note is there are some attributes that aren't supported here, and they're more the less commonly used attributes, and they're listed here on this slide. So if we take a look at an example of how we can hide and show these attributes based on business rules, the business rule that I had created in my prior slide was if the charge code was documentation, I was hiding two attributes, which was the go live date and the SLA. And you can see from the lower screen here, the screenshot that I'm showing, once I modified the charge code from management to documentation, you can see that now the go live date and the SLA attributes are hidden in the property screen for this project. Now if you have other business rules defined that use the condition for a hidden attribute, those are still going to execute normally and they won't be impacted at all by the hidden attribute. And if you have a section of attributes and all the attributes are hidden in the whole section, we're also going to hide the section. The last new feature that we need to cover for blueprints is the ability to configure the details flyout for subobjects. This is something that administrators will do in the master object blueprint, and we're going to take a look at a project example. So what they'll do is they'll open the blueprint up in edit mode and they will highlight the subobject where they want to configure the details flyout. In this case we're going to do the task. Then they'll click the edit module details and then they will select the modules tab on the next screen, and you can see from the screenshot that the conversations module was enabled for tasks, and what we want to do in this example is we want to disable it. So what we'll do is we'll drag and drop it from the right pane into the blue pane, and then we'll publish and save this change. This is supported in projects, ideas, and custom investment blueprints, and it's also supported for out-of-the-box subobjects, the ones that are listed here under each master object, as well as custom subobjects that are at level 2 only. And by default, all subobject modules are shown today in the details flyout, and we haven't changed that behavior. The e-commerce portal project is using the blueprint that we just removed the conversations module from for tasks, and you can see here on this slide that we're looking at a task under the e-commerce portal project, functional and technical design, and you can see its details flyout does no longer have the conversations module, and it only contains the modules that admin configured in the blueprint. And now we've reached the demonstration portion to our training. So first I'm going to show you how to create business rules for always true and conditional for abstract investment custom subobjects. We'll look at the toggles, configure the create dialog, and view the required attribute enforcement in action. And after that, for master objects, we'll look at the hide and show attributes, how to create the business roles, and we'll see it in action. And lastly, we will look at the subobject module, the configuration of the details flyout. So the first thing that we'll take a look at today under administration is our business rules. So we'll navigate to blueprints, and under our project blueprint, put it in edit mode. And the first rule that we'll take a look at is the one that's always true. So as you can see, our target object is capacity percent, which is a subobject against the abstract investment object. And you would select always true, and when you do that, the only action available is required attributes, and then you would select here any of the attributes that should be required against this subobject. In this case, I've selected capacity type. And when you're done, you just click save and you publish your blueprint. The next type of business rule that I want to look at is conditional ones. And we're using the same custom subobject against the abstract investment object. And in this case, instead of building an always true one, we're building a conditional one, where committed is equal to yes. And you can build whatever kind of conditions that you want here, just like you can with any other business rules. And under actions, you need to select required attributes, and based on this condition, you will select the attributes that apply. So in this rule, I've defined it as when committed equals yes, approved by is a required attribute. And when you're done, you just click Save, and then you publish your blueprint. Next, let's take a look in this blueprint of the toggles that are available for that module. So we're looking at the capacity percent sub-object, and you can see that now for the sub-object we have these toggles that are available. The enable quick create, enable create dialog, and show in details flyout. And here is where you would define the layout for the create modal. And this here would be disabled by default. So it's enabled, and in order for administrators to change the layout, they'll click Edit Module Details, and they'll navigate to the Create tab, and they'll just drag and drop any attributes from the left pane into the right pane that they want to show up during creation of instances for new capacity percent. And in this case, I've selected the allocation percent, the committed, and approved by. And whenever those changes are done, they would just, administrators would just publish them. So to show you how this would work, I'll just grab one of these attributes here, and you can expand them, grow them, move them around for the layout, etc. And you can define it any way that you would like to. And when you're done, you just click Publish. And now that we have our blueprint changes done for that sub-object, let's take a look of what this looks like in Clarity. So we can navigate to, we're going to look at the e-commerce portal project. And the first thing you'll notice here is that the capacity percent sub-object, the one that we just navigated to, now has a new capacity button. This is the create modal that we just enabled. So users could just click on this, and they'll get the dialog that we just configured with the capacity type, allocation, committed, and approved by, and anything that's required attribute is shown by an asterisk. So let's just enter some data here. Create. Now that we've gone through the process of creating a new instance, let's take a look at how some of these business roles are behaving. If you'll recall, capacity type was an always true business role. So notice that as long as I enter whatever values that I want in here, I'm not able to get the create button until I actually enter a value here, and that's how this business role is enforced. And that was an always true business role. So let's take a look at a conditional business role. If you recall, I had a condition set that if the committed is equal to no or yes, then I have to have an approved by. So let's try and change that here. And this will be during update. And you can see that when I changed that value, it's soft required, and I do have the required fields dialog, and it's asking me to fill out an approved by value. And I can cancel, escape, or whatever out of that. But anytime I go in and update any values within that, as long as I have that, it's going to keep triggering this business role until it's satisfied. And in this case, let's just choose one. You can see I can save it here, and I'll no longer get that business rule triggered since I've satisfied it. Now once your business rules are satisfied, anything that's required you're not able to clear out. So if we went in here and we selected none, you'll see that we're getting a toast message here that we're not allowed to do that. And likewise, if we tried to clear out the approved by, which was conditional because committed equals yes, we're going to get the same type of behavior on that business role as well. Now I've shown you an example in the grid, but it'll behave the same way in the details flyout for this sub-object. Another feature that I wanted to demo today is we'll go back to blueprints here. And we'll go into the blueprint that we've been reviewing, into edit mode. And we'll take a look at how for master objects you can actually create new business rules against master objects that will conditionally hide attributes. So in this case, I've selected the project as my target object, and the condition that I've chosen is when charge code equals documentation. And you can build whatever kind of conditions you want, but they have to be attributes that are within the target object, in this case for project. And here you would select hide attributes as your action, and you would select all of the attributes that you want to hide. In this case, I've selected two, SLA and go live date. And you have a choice here for hide selected. You can either hide the attributes that you've selected, or you could choose to hide all of the attributes except the ones that are selected, which is the opposite. So once you're done creating this business rule, you would click Save, and then you would publish your blueprint change. So let's get out of administration and actually take a look at how that business rule is behaving. So if we go back into our project for e-commerce portal, and this type of business rule will only work on the property screen. But if we go in here, you can see that for this project, the charge code is deploy, so I'm seeing the other two conditionally hidden attributes, go live date and SLA, because we're only hiding if it's documentation. So let's change that. So we'll change that to be documentation, and you can see as soon as you click out of that, it'll save it. Refresh the screen, and you can see now that these two attributes are hidden. And I could actually put them back by selecting another value here, and you will notice that those two attributes are back. And you can build this kind of business rule on ideas and custom investments as well. And the last capability that I want to demo today is configuring the details flyout for sub-objects. So if we go back into blueprints, I'm going to go in the blueprint we've been editing, go into edit mode. We want to go to modules, and we need to choose a sub-object. In this case, the sub-object that we're going to configure the details flyout is tasks. So you'll click on edit module details, and you can see that we have by default all the modules are enabled. But what we want to do is we want to disable conversations. So let's just take that module and drag it off, because we want to disable it, and you can see that it's white, and we'll just publish that change to our blueprint. So next we'll go and we'll navigate to our project, e-commerce portal, and we'll look at tasks, and we want to look at the details flyout for tasks, which we have up here, and you can see that all of the modules are here and conversations is no longer displayed. And that was the last capability that I wanted to demo today for this feature. And this concludes the supportability training for Blueprint Enhancements. Thank you.